Well, thank you all for inviting me on again. I did this about a month ago or 6 weeks and enjoyed the heck out of it. So here's a slightly different topic, um, and it's chasing DX during a contest. This is something I've worked on over the years, and it turns out that if you do it right, it's fairly easy to pick up countries that you need. But you got to there's a certain approach to it, and I'm going to just touch on that. Here's who I am. I was first licensed in 71. I didn't really start DXing until 1980. And then the next 10 years after that, college and marriage and everything else, I really didn't do it. But I'm sitting at 325 now, mobile DXCC, 8-band DXC, so a couple things like that. Um, some of the extracurriculars I do is I was a CW Ops instructor. I haven't done that for a while. Um, I edit two newsletters, the Southwest Ohio DX Association newsletter and the Twin City DX Association newsletter. Southwest Ohio, we're the group that puts on the DX dinner on Friday night of Hamvention weekend, and on Saturday we do the DX forum during the morning on Saturday. I also have a section that Anthony's also a huge contributor to the Ohio Section Journal. So a couple other things. I'm a letter sorter for the Bureau, and I have a new kind of a venture. It's a weekly what's coming up in DX kind of a thing. So it's something that I'm just getting into. All right. So here's my operating position. It's fairly modest. The only picture I've got I do now have a hex beam at 30 feet. I don't have that on here, but I do have a vertical in the side yard and OCF dipole antenna, and there's my station. So nothing, there's no four 100-foot towers or anything. These are my most recent QSL cards from Caesars Creek, which is close here in Waynesville, Ohio. I'm in somewhat the southwest corner of the state. And feel free to drop me a note at aj8b@arl.net or visit the website. Or if you're going to be here for Hamvention, I'd love to hook up with you. So keep that in mind. So if you're going to chase DX during a contest, you kind of got to make a decision. Because if you're familiar with contesting, normally you get into a contest and you want to do your best. And doing your best means that you find some balance between rate and multipliers. And if you're not familiar with a contest, rate is simply working everything you can hear as fast as you can work it. And multipliers are somewhat abandoning that strategy and working countries. So let's say the CQ Worldwide DX contest, the idea there is to work as many different countries and zones as you can. And for each of those, you get what's called a multiplier, and you add those up and you multiply it by the number of contacts, basically. So you strike a balance between the number of contacts that you can make in an hour and the number of multipliers you can work. However, if you really want to pick up an all-time new one or an ATNO, or you want to pick up needed entities for certain band slots, rates and multipliers are no longer as important because your goal is to try to just pick that entity out. So where in a contest you might, in my mind, it's like if I go a minute and a half and I haven't worked somebody, I move off and I try to find the next person depending on how I'm doing it. If I'm calling and I can't get through, I may sit for an hour or 2 hours if it's really a new country that I need. So you strike a balance, and it's really a personal choice. You can do both, but I do think you got to make some priorities. And I think in my case, the priority is I will look for certain entities as long as that the band is open to that section. And then when it isn't, then I'll kick into more of a contest mode. And what I found is I can actually get a couple of either an ATNO or some new band slots and get a pretty nice score and feel good about the contest. So it's a little bit of work, a little bit of balance, but that's what you get. So I'm just curious if any of these apply to you. And those of you that were with me about a month ago, these are not won't be new to you, but these are just some cartoons that I love. I'm not sure where I found this one, but this kind of pertains to a lot of guys only work DX during contest weekends, and that's fine. Um, you always have it on your mind. So I went about a week trying to work Andaman Islands, which are on right now, VU4AX. And I couldn't get him. And then Monday night, I got him on three different bands, just boom, out of the blue. So last night conditions were horrible, and tonight they're booming in. So, you got to kind of keep it on your mind, keep it in front of you. And I think balance really is important. You can get overboard with this, and it'll eat you up. And then all of a sudden, you're not having fun. It's too much like work. And when you're chasing DX, longevity really is important. I've got several countries that don't exist anymore. For instance, Canal Zone, East Germany, Czechoslovakia. Those countries are still on the list, but they're on the deleted list. So things are changing all the time, and it's kind of surprising because you don't really think there's many new countries, but there really are. I've always liked this guy and the attitude that he has. He's kind of a cool guy, cool commercial. So what you have is you have a variety of contests. So sometimes you have open-ended contests, and I would even call these ham radio career pursuits like DXCC or Islands on the Air. You're never done with that. You're going year after year after year, and you're trying to increase your numbers. There's some regional, like U.S. counties or Russian districts awards. Now, the Russian district awards used to be called oblasts, and they aren't as popular as they used to be because of the divestiture of the Soviet Union, but you can still collect those, and they're really beautiful awards. There are some band specifics. For instance, like there's several for 160 that don't exist for anything else. There's a guy in Southwest Ohio that offers an award for 60, even though 60 meters is not valid for DX credit. Joe offers that award. There's the Worked All Prefix or the WPX award, which simply gives you credits for every new prefix you earn, and that's kind of a lifelong thing. And then there's something called the DXCC Challenge. So, for instance, every time, if you think of Romania, Romania is pretty common, let's say, but if you work it on 8 different bands, you now have a count of 8. So as you start working all these countries on these different bands, that number starts to increase. Kind of the threshold of that separates some from the others is 3,000. So if you have DXCC challenge of 3,000 or greater, that's pretty impressive. And there's a handful of guys that have done it. And in fact, there's a couple every month that get announced that they've broken that threshold. So the ones that I'm going to talk about tonight are what I would call close-ended. They occur every year. They're typically annual contests. During the ARLDX contest, for instance, you can earn your DXCC or worked all states. Certainly during sweepstakes, you could do worked all states. CQ Worldwide, you could do worked all zones. And the great thing about CQ Worldwide is part of the exchange is the zone. So you don't really have to hear his call, believe it or not. If you hear his zone, you'll know if it's a zone you need or not. So it allows you to hone in a little bit. So these are a number of different contests that go year to year, but it allows you to kind of build up your points. And the one that seems to be getting more popular all the time is the CQ Marathon. And I believe there's a couple of y'all that participate pretty actively in the marathon. I think Mark has presented to you guys before, WC3W, and he is passionate about what he does. And it's a very interesting program. So here is a typical QSL card, and this is from Eugenia Island. If somebody can say that, that would be better. But as you study the QSL card, you might ask yourselves, well, how many awards would this QSL card be good for? And when you look at the back, he's got all these different things, the ITU zone, the OBLAST, the worked all zones, the IOTA designation. So getting online, I was able to research at least 8 different awards this particular QSO would be good for. And you don't always get that lucky and hit a target-rich environment, but for this one, it turned out that way. You can actually qualify for an award in a weekend. And there's a real good contester, Scott Wright, K0MD, and his goal every contest he works is to work 100 entities on 3 different bands. And if he can do that, then he feels like he's spent the time he needed, he's made a contribution, and he'll probably get a good score. That's above my league and the time I'm willing to commit, but boy, it's a heck of a goal to shoot for. So 100 entities or 50 states or 40 zones, those are all things that you can shoot for on a contest weekend. But I think if you're going to chase DX during a contest, I think there's some steps that you have to follow. And the first is you got to determine your need. And I don't know if you've ever done this or not, but if you're chasing DX or if it's something you're interested in, there's so many countries and so many bands and so many modes. Sometimes you kind of forget what you need. For instance, several years ago, I found out that I'd never worked Hungary on 40 meters, and I was shocked because I thought I'd have bet I worked Hungary a bunch of times, but I never had. It's just one of those countries that just didn't work. So that all of a sudden very quickly became, okay, I got to knock this one out. There's nothing especially difficult about Hungary. It just never happened. So you got to know what your need is, and then you got to find out if it's available. What I mean by that is, let's say you need Korea, and Korea I don't think has been on in 28 years, maybe. I think there was one or two small activations, but to sit in a contest and try to work Korea is never going to happen because they outlawed amateur radio. So you got to make sure that your need is actually available. And there's two places you can do that. Bernie W3UR has daily DX updates and something called the weekly DX. And NG3K has a website where he lists all of the upcoming DXpeditions, and both of those are great sources. Bernie's is real time. NG3K is more of a here's what's being planned, and it's about 90% accurate. Um, Once you've determined your need and is it available, then you got to start getting much more scientific and say, okay, can I work Andaman Island from here? And if I can, what hours is it most likely to occur? So that's like the third step. And it may be band specific. If I need them all bands, I don't care. I'll find the band that works the best. But if it is maybe I only need them on 10 meters, then that becomes much more of a band specific. Maybe it's mode specific. I only need Bouvet on CW, and I don't need it on anything else. So I'm going to focus on that for that mode. And most importantly, and I think this is the biggest thing, you got to stay in the chair. You got to listen, you got to tune, and you got to listen some more. And you got to plan. What I would really heavily suggest is that you plan on being in the chair the week before. And the reason for that is, there's a lot of guys that will go to, DX sites planning to work, let's say CQ Worldwide on a particular weekend, but they'll get there a week ahead of time because they'll test their antennas, they'll test their equipment, maybe they brought their stuff with them. And quite often you will pick up entities that you need as they're testing out their equipment. That's happened quite a bit. Um, and the other thing that'll happen is that if someone's going down for a CW contest, the week before they may work sideband and they may work FT8. So it's a good time to pick up those other modes if you need them. And a few days after, because if the contest ends at 23:59 Zulu, they're not going to be in a flight 2 hours later. They're probably going to be there another day or two while they break down, and oftentimes they'll go back to another mode. So it's usually a great time the week before and the week after to pick up some good DX. Sometimes it's easy pickings. Um, The contest, though, the advantage of the contest, it's the one time that they need you. So before we got on here, I was listening to Nepal, 9N7AA was on, and the pileup was just ferocious, and he was calling up 5 to 10 split and all this other stuff. But in a contest, oftentimes they need you. And what I kind of like, and I see a couple calls that fit this, AJ8B is kind of a different call, and that becomes very sought after during a WPX contest. So it is the one time that the DX station needs you. The other thing I really encourage you to do is to listen who they're working. And I actually usually have an index card because I want to hear where it's coming in. And you can't listen to the signal report because during a contest, everybody's 5'9". Even if they have to repeat their call 10 times, they're still 5'9". So you really got to listen to who they're talking to. And that will change over time. Um, Sunday afternoons, there is some wisdom out there that says if you want to get in, you want to work some really good stuff, Sunday afternoon is the sweet spot. And there's good logic there because the idea is that the big stations have worked everything out and now they're looking to just get points. They're trying to get their rate up. They're trying to find people that they haven't worked before. There's a problem with that though. And I ran into this, I think it was maybe 2010. I was really after Tunisia. I had not worked Tunisia before. Was kind of another one of those that had slipped through, and I thought I'm going to work these guys. And sure enough, Friday night they were coming in like gangbusters. I didn't even get in. I didn't even try. Saturday I only had a little bit of time, but I tried. I didn't work them. I thought, okay, I'm all set. Sunday's going to be great. And there was a coronal mass ejection, and the band was gone, and they were gone. So I blew that whole weekend because I really wasn't serious until Sunday afternoon, and they were gone. So you have to take that into account. So I don't, if it's really something I need, I don't gamble anymore. I try to find the space and then see if I can get them. So some general contest thoughts then. If you're familiar with spots, there's a spotting network that probably everyone is familiar with at this point, where, from different areas of the country, someone will say, hey, I just heard 3 Victor 8 from Tunisia on. My logging software, for instance, if it sees that spot, it will send a text to my phone. which is pretty common now, I think. There's also a DX cluster app. And the new one that has me really interested is something called Ham Alert. If you use this, it's terrific. And if you don't, it's well worth pulling down. This guy could charge for it. He doesn't. He's got 60, 70,000 downloads. It's very easy to set up. And if there's something that's been spotted, like you can literally say Ohio or Idaho or whatever state you want to hear the spot in, the only time it will alert you is when you get that spot. So Ham Alert is just a terrific tool. And then, sometimes you have to have friends. I mentioned earlier a guy in Southwest Ohio, WAGEX, Joe. I know I have a post-it here with what he needs, and he has an index card of what I need, and it's an index card because I need a whole lot more than he needs. But if we hear that, oftentimes we'll text each other, which is a little selfish on our part. But the kind of my theory has always been if I hear something rare, I will work it first, and then I'll spot it because I don't want 100,000 other guys coming down on them while I'm trying to work them at the same time. So maybe a little selfish, but Joe and I will notify each other and we'll try to do it. In the old days, and a long time ago, we used to have a phone chain. So if I heard something on at 2 a.m. and I knew Anthony needed it, I would call him. So 2 a.m. in the morning, this is Anthony. Dude, UA0RR is on, such and such. And he'd say, that's great. I need to now call WB8LCD. And then he would call somebody else. And then it migrated to some 2 meter, there was 2 meter spotting networks. And now it's become full circuit where everything is basically messaging and on your phone. But that's how we used to do it. It's just a new way to do it. And everybody needs an Elmer. Now, maybe not that one, but you need somebody that you can talk to, that you can learn DX from, that can show you some of the tricks. And there are some tricks. So a lot of the times I'll talk about different things I've been able to do with my logging software, and then somebody will say, well, what logging software do you use? Okay, so what I use, next slide, I use something called DX Lab. Now, this is not an ad for DX Lab, to be right up front. However, the software is free. There's a huge support for the community, and it was written and still maintained to this day by Dave Bernstein, AA6YQ. I don't know if you've had him present before, but he does a terrific job of presenting on how he got his software together. He is an IBM fellow. I mean, he really knows what he's doing. Frankly, I used to work for him at an IBM company, and it's his software. But like I said, it's free, and I've used it for on maybe 13 years now. And it just works great. And this is an overwhelming slide. I know that right up front, but the DX Lab is literally a suite of tools. So if all I want to do is log, I have something called DX Keeper. If I want to do DX spots, then I enable another module. If I want to control my transceiver, I have another module. It's a little bit of a steep learning curve, but it is just absolutely terrific, and you'll see some of the features. And I'm not saying that other logging softwares don't have this. I'm just not familiar with them. So um, this is kind of just a screenshot during a RITI contest, some of the different screens that you have. So we're going to go back now, and I'm going to show you some details. So I'm going to summarize the steps in the contest, determine your need, is it available, map propagation to your need, and stay in the chair. So those are the things we're going to cover in the next few minutes. So how do you determine your need? Well, that may seem simple on the surface, but that's where your logging software comes in. So you should run a report ahead of time that says, what do you need? What haven't you worked? Well, in this example, and this is several years old, although I ran it the other night, Singapore might be one that I need. That's the one we're going to use as an example tonight, 9 Victor, Singapore. So that's going to be our goal tonight, is to find a time in the CQ Worldwide CW contest where we can uh, emphasize the best chance we have to work Singapore. Um, However, maybe it's just an all CW contest. I can run the very same report and I say, well, I don't care what band it is. Show me what I need on CW. So it gives me a list like that. So these might have been worked and confirmed on another mode, but not CW. Or it's a 10-meter contest. So I want it to tell me, hey, show me what I need on 10 meters. And these are blocked out because all of these have been on recently on 10 meters, with 10 meters being open. And if you're chasing DX, I'll give you a hint. I heard recently that Libya is going to have a full-out ham radio assault this summer because they've just been admitted to the ITU, and they're really doing their best to get all 7 of their hams on a lot in the summer. So if Libya is something you'd like to work or talk to, it should be coming up. And that's really a great breakthrough that they were added to the ITU.
You're
That's
getting
terrific.
awfully close there, mister.
I'm sorry?
Oh,
Okay. So again, let's recap. We're going to assume that we're going to be in the CQ Worldwide CW contact, and I'm going to work as much as I can, but I want to focus on one all-time new one, and that's going to be Singapore. Okay, and if you go to
to
a
be a
map, you
lot.
see if you go to a map, you see where Singapore is, and I'll highlight that a little bit. And it's over on it's almost the antipode, which is the if you drill directly through the world, it actually comes out somewhere around here. So we're not that far from no matter which direction you go, it's long. That's basically what that means. All right, next slide is there. So again, 9 Victor Singapore. And the reason I picked 9 Victor is that I had worked them, I swore I worked them in the late 80s, and I got the dreaded QSL card back stamped not in the log. And I don't know if any all have done that. Currently you work them and you see them online and stuff, but that wasn't available back then. So sometimes you would work somebody and you would know for 6 months that they weren't in the log. And it's devastating when you get a card that you were counting on and it's not there. I also had 2 CW contacts, but I couldn't get either one confirmed. One actually had my call as AJ8E, so that didn't work, and the other one just said I wasn't in the log. So I just didn't have any luck with Singapore. So I picked Singapore. Here's where we're going to go. Now, is it going to be available for that weekend? So and again, this is dated, but the first thing I did is I went out and looked at the ng3k.com website. What is going to be available? What the expeditions are planned for that weekend? And if you look at this, there was Rwanda and St. Bart's, but none of those are Singapore. So that doesn't help. None listed. So then using my logging software and the DX Lab, the spotting portion of this is called Spot Collector. You can go in and you can say, okay, show me in the last 2 weeks all of the spots that have come from Southeast Asia. And it gives you this list. And now you can start breaking it down. And it gives you a lot of details like what was the signal to noise ratio and all these other cool things. But now you can start drilling down. You say, well, these are from Asia. These were spots from Asia. What am I going to see? And we're going to go here. And here's what I boiled it down to was in the last 2 weeks, 2 different 9 Victor stations were spotted in several weeks in my region. And the reason that's important is honestly, I'll pick on Anthony again. If Anthony hears it up in northern Ohio, it really doesn't help me a lot in southwestern Ohio. And likewise, if I spot it down here, he may not hear it. So it's important to try to get spots that are close to where you're at. And that way you know with more certainty. And there's no guarantees, but you know with more certainties that there's a really good chance that you could have worked those guys. So here's 2 examples, 9:15. So this was 2 weeks before CQ Worldwide RIDI. But I was just doing some homework, and you could see at the time it says it was needed for DXCC, for Marathon, and for the prefix, and all that makes sense. I was encouraged that it was 2 different stations, so it wasn't the same guy. So that's one way to do it. The second thing I did is I thought, okay, I got this contest coming up, though. Are there any contest stations in Singapore? Because if there aren't any contest stations, this is really going to be hit or miss. So I went to cqworldwide.com/results. And I found every year, the first year, I believe the first year was 2019, there were at least 5 stations that logged 300 QSOs or more. The next year there were 4, and the next year there were 5 again. So now I'm starting to feel pretty good. Is that these are 3 years in a row, there were at least 4 9 Victor stations that were participating in the contest. So now I'm thinking, okay, there's probably going to be somebody on. Now I got to figure out, can I work them? So now I'm going to look at propagation. What time in that 48-hour period that I have the contest, what are the best times in band for me to get ready to try to work 9 Victor? So there is again, another tool in this DX suite called propagation or prop prediction. So what I did is I said, well, if I know the contest is going to be at the end of the month, I'm going to go 2 weeks before that, and now I'm going to run a test. So what I did is I ran a propagation forecast 2 weeks ahead of time. Actually, I went 3 weeks ahead of time for that 2 week window, if you get what I mean. So I need the results before the contest. So I just let it run, and of course, what it does, like every ham software will collect these spots and they put them in a database, and then you can go back and analyze them. So I said, what was predicted versus what actually showed up? That was the next step, because if I can't rely on the tool, if it's way off, it's a total waste of time. So I'm trying to find out how accurate the tool is. I hope that makes sense. So in this propagation view, there's a couple of conditions you put in. And the first one is, what do you think the date is? And what Dave does on his software, he doesn't leave anything to chance. So as soon as you put the date in and you click the U, it will go out to the NOAA and the WWV sites and pull down the information. What it projects that the SFI will be, the signal to noise, the K and the A index, and all that kind of stuff, and what mode you're using. Then you put in your station information. How much power do you think you're going to run? I put 200. Then you put in the DX station. Well, of course, I don't know a specific DX station, but I kind of picked central Singapore. I put the latitude and longitude in there, and I said, okay, he's going to be running 500 watts. Go ahead and tell me what your projection is going to be. And here's what it said. It said that in this overall, I'm looking at it. So, well, for 20 meters is probably going to be my best bet. And I know it's gray line. So I'm kind of looking like let's say an hour before and an hour after. So right between 10 and 1400 Zulu at this time might be my best chance. And I say, what band would that be? Well, the minimal usable frequency here is black, and that's about just under 20 meters. So I got a good probability 20 meters is going to be the sweet spot. And at least one of those spots I knew in the last 2 weeks was also from 20 meters. So that supported my investigation. So that's what I'm looking for right there. A little before and a little after. Actually, more after, but a little before. So my time period is done. I've collected all these spots, and now I'm going to go back and look and see how they flew. So I said, all right, now show me all the spots from Asia that came in during a certain time frame. And here they are. And I didn't display all of them, of course, but there's a whole bunch of different spots. And you can see all these Asian stations, Mongolia and China and Thailand and Turkey and all these different cool things. But now I'm looking from that continent, and you can then chart that. So you can say, okay, don't show me the actual list, show me a data graph of how this stuff fell out. So it said the most spots that came in for that region of the world was 20 meters. And most of them are right here between 12 and 15. So this is actual real-time data. This is not projected data. This is the real-time data from the weekend before. Well, if I take that and I match it up to what the prediction is, I find out it's actually pretty accurate. It had predicted that between 11:30 Zulu and to 16:30 Zulu, a 5-hour window, 40, 30, and 20 would be the bands with my best chance. In reality, between 1200 and 1500, the majority of the spots from that area of the world were found on 20 meters. So it actually took the predicted and correlated it to the actual and made me feel pretty good about the tool. So I just redid the analysis, and it said during the contest, you should be looking in this direction, at this time of the world on this band, and you should have your best results. Doesn't guarantee it. And of course, there's all kinds of issues, CMEs and propagation, A and K index and QRM and everything else. But you're trying to narrow this down so you can work these all-time new ones. And as it turned out, I got them. So that was really exciting. It was like, wow, I was able to prove it and actually worked them. But there's one other thing that you should never forget about, no matter what all this tells you. It's something called the gray line. And if you're familiar with the gray line, it's this divider between daylight and darkness and daylight. And what's basically happening there is that the layers that do night reflection of the signal have not collapsed yet as it goes into day. And on the other end, the day layers are still energized as the night areas are coming up. So you kind of get a bonus, if you will. So if you're shooting at the gray line, there's a lot of times, plus or minus an hour on this gray line, you can work DX that you won't hear any other time of the day. And this is actually effective even during a very low sunspot cycle. Gray line can still be hot. And I know several guys that plan their work route or their time to work around whatever the gray line is. And for 9 Victor Singapore, gray line is plus 13 hours. So no matter what my propagation said, I still always rely on the gray line. I turn the beam that way, and hopefully I get something out of it. Make sure you regularly operate and pay attention. And I can't emphasize that enough. You will have a feeling for propagation already if you work a lot. You'll know about other modes and bands, and you end up trusting your gut. Should I chase this guy? I'll never work him. Maybe I should. Maybe I should stick my nose in. Um, Joe has a really good story about a he was chasing Scarborough Reef, and he wasn't getting through, so he decided, well, I'm not going to sit here and call. I'm actually going to listen. And they were like, God, if I remember the story, it was like 14.2. And all of a sudden he heard the operator say 14.350, 14.300. So Joe heard that and he said, well, that's kind of odd. And he went up there and he worked him on the first call. And that guy had thrown that out there for people back home that wanted to work him, they would follow him up there. Well, because Joe was listening and not just transmitting, he heard that, he worked him on the first call. It turned out that's the only time he'd worked Scarborough ever. So that was quite a coup for him just because he listened. And again, the other thing is I think you really do have to stay in the chair. Um, keep computer logging and record keeping. I think everybody does that now. Excuse me. DX clusters are important. Read the DX bulletins, join a DX or a contest club. There are two contests that I work pretty much weekly now. One is the CWT, which is a weekly 1 hour contest with the CW Ops Club. And there's four of them on a Wednesday or Thursday morning. I'm usually only able to work one of them. But on Thursday, there's a RIDI. Um, the same thing for RIDI. It's only a half hour, but if you like radio teletype, it's a way to kind of stay on top of it and continue to work. Use Logbook of the World or EQSL. And here's another important point. If you're not an ARL member, you can still submit to LOTW. And I would really encourage you to do that because it benefits other folks that need to confirm your call. So you do not have to be a member of the league to use LOTW to upload to LOTW. But as I said, I think one of the key things you have to do is you got to listen. And it doesn't matter what kind of station you have. It doesn't matter. None of that matters if you're not willing to listen. Um, you hear a lot of interesting things, and most of the time you hear not what to do. And I think that's important. Well, here's another little a trick that I learned the hard way, is that don't ever forget your favorite band or a non-contest mode. So, for instance, frankly, my favorite band is 30 meters. I've always loved 30 meters. It's just a great band. It's pretty much a solid band, independent of the Sunspot cycle. Not really, um, but it kind of is. And there's a couple hams I know, 9J2BO, Brian in Zambia. He works contest weekends, but he doesn't on the WARC bands. So he'll come down to 30 meters. He'll go to 17 meters. He'll go to 12 meters because he doesn't want to get in all the pileups, but he likes to work guys. So it's that time where there won't be nearly as much traffic. Also, a lot of DXers will get on the non-mode. So if it's a sideband contest, they'll go down and work CW. So if you're using N1MM, and if you aren't familiar with N1MM, Anthony has a terrific a couple of videos actually on N1MM and configuring it. But I leave that open to make sure that I can also see if it's a sideband contest, I still want to see the CW spots because I don't want to miss something that I really need. Um, and I'm not afraid to just jump over to a different mode or a different band to try to work them. I don't want to be shy about it. The other thing you need to do, and I never thought of this. I don't know why, but I needed Alaska years ago on 80 meters for worked all states, and it would have been entity number 99 on 80 meters. So I thought, okay, I'm going to really hunt down Alaska. So I found him on 40 and I worked him, and I said to him, hey, do you guys have a station on 80? And I did get a question one time, how do you ask? Well, this is how I did it. He gave me my report. I gave him, hey, you're 5'9" in zone 4, 80 meters question mark. And he was like, okay, wait a minute. He checked 3503. So I spun down there, and sure enough, I got him. And had I had to try to bust through, and it's noisy and all the other stuff, I don't know when I'd have worked him on 80. But during the contest, I just asked him to QSY. They did it, and I got him, and it was very, very easy, very quick. So don't ever be afraid to do that. And again, they need the points. So they're not shy about telling you where else to work them. The only thing you have to be careful about sometimes, like on 40 meters, the Europeans will operate split, and they might tell you to go to a certain frequency that maybe for phone that's not in our phone band. And they just do it out of habit because they have a different allocation. So you really got to be careful about that. But because you've been in the seat, because you know your radio well, you're not going to make that mistake. I have, and I caught myself pretty quickly. But So what we did is we determined our need. We tried to find out if it's available. We looked at propagation, and then we decided we're going to stay in the chair and see what we can do. So my question was, how would you feel if you got a good scar and an all-time new one? And I'll tell you, I was thrilled working Singapore because it was like I planned it, and it was there, and it wasn't easy, but I got them. So I was pretty charged about that. So there you go. So I hope that was helpful. I hope it was informative. And do we have any questions?
We're good in chat, Dan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let me get you all a spotlight.
Victor has his hand up.
There we go. And anybody got any questions out there? You said, oh yeah, Victor, you got your hand up. Go for it.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. You talked about listening, and listening is so important. And I've been around operators who had the radio on so loud that when an operator would come booming in, they would say, you know, I hear this guy, but I can't understand him. I said, you need to turn your radio down. Turn your radio down, bring him in at a whisper. And a lot of that stuff goes away because I guess you're not pounding your eardrums is the main key. I never have figured out how to deal with operators who are very quiet. So suddenly you're not hearing them transmit and put out their call sign when you're focusing on this one operator. Maybe you know of a trick to do that. And so much of what we do in contesting is just timing. You know how the exchange is going to work. You know what the script is for the exchange. It's call sign, it's power, it's your 5-9, and it's your location, and you're out of here. Maybe you can pick up that rotation and pick up get your call sign in there in time to connect with your operator. But listening can often be helped by lowering the volume so that you can understand what operators are saying. Thank you.
And to your point, Victor, there is a trend where people will, and the Europeans do this a lot. In fact, there's a couple of Italians that do this all the time. They will use N1MM and they will record, CQ and exchanges, but they'll have like an XYL do it, who's got the much higher voice. So when they're calling CQ and then they come back to you, it's like, hey JP, you're fine. And it really throws you off. It's like, is this another station that just broke in or what? To your point, I've heard some of those stations that are really quiet. And about the best you can do is kind of go back and say, hey, there's QRM, there's QRN, everything's fading, QSB, I got to get your call right. And he wants to get in the log, he wants to get it right, but sometimes it takes a lot of persistence to keep him going. The other thing, I meant to add this as a slide, the other thing you have to be careful of is, if you're using a spotting network and you're in N1MM and you're getting all these spots that are flowing in, and I know guys will just click on it, they'll work them and they'll put it in the log, and they don't always pay attention to the fact that, well, that call wasn't right. Maybe when somebody spotted it, it was K8 GT and it could have been K8 ZT and they didn't pay attention to it. And I just logged K8 ZT because I didn't pay attention to it either. So even though it's somewhat automatic, you really need to pay attention to it because you don't want too many of those, or all of a sudden your accuracy just drops a lot. So that was a great point. Thank you. I've got another hand up, I think.
I don't see any more hands up.
Brad? Or is that my hand? Oh, that's my mouse. Whoops.
All right. Anybody else? Hands up in the chat, whatever. Hello.
Hi,
Yes,
Dan.
sir.
Dan, I got one.
Hey, go for it.
Well, first of all, thanks, Bill. Great advice. Bill said a lot of very important things in that talk. That even if you're new to contesting, new to DXing, lot of great tips to get you going. And yeah, KGT is who I always get busted for.
Really?
When I first got my call sign, he had been doing it for so long that I was always getting busted. And then I talked to him a few years later, and he gets equally busted. So on CW and phone both, because the G and the Z sound similar, and the only one dit away from each other. So I always tell him he's one dit away from a good call, and he says I have an extraneous dit attached to my call.
Carol, I do see no. I mean, boy, any advice for CW contesting?
Carol, last week we talked about CW, adding CW to your repertoire. It wasn't contesting per se, but there was a lot of tips in that for contesting. The other big thing too is if you're going to be going to Hamvention, think about going to Contest University. It's a great way to get a lot of good contesting information. And even if you don't go, they publish all the presentations, and they do about a quarter of the sessions get videotaped, so recorded, I should say. So Contest University, if you've never been there before, make sure you go to that site.
Is that Carol from the Seattle DX Club by chance?
Oh, I'm in swim.
So there, I did think of one other thing though. If to give you advice, I have a Raspberry Pi that records. It can record up to 72 hours of audio off my radio, and when I hear a station that's really doing an excellent job, I'll record it, and I'll play it back later to try to learn what he's doing and how quickly he's moving, and so I do that a lot at CW. The other thing I have learned, I used to thought I was really cute, and I would use like tail ending and drop part of my call. And all that just makes it longer. I don't do any of that anymore. I just send full call. I try to get them and do it that way. But the recording and playing back, I just used to listen to it in the car. That would I would learn more from just listening to that. And you listen to it and you get your code speed up as well. But it was more the technique that I was really trying to get, and it was very helpful.
Anybody else? That was great, Carol. Thank you very much for shooting in there.
Well, thank you all for the opportunity, and I'll be tuning in to listen to somebody else soon. So,
Okay, well, I look forward to your slides. I get them out there, and look forward to having you come back again.
you'll have them in a few minutes. So,
Okay, not a problem, not a problem.
all right, thank you all.
All right, well, with that, anybody else got anything before I go pull the plug?
Thank you all for coming. See you tomorrow night.
Okay, with that, we'll say 73s. Hope to see most of you tomorrow night. I think you'll enjoy it. 73s, everyone. Thanks for showing up tonight.